Marcus Rodriguez never imagined that losing his construction job would lead him to save 2 lives and change his family's destiny forever. When flames engulfed the abandoned textile factory on the outskirts of Detroit, and he heard children screaming from inside, the unemployed father of 3 didn't hesitate for a second. What he discovered in that inferno wasn't just 2 terrified 7-year-olds, but the key to solving his family's deepest struggles and uncovering a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of corporate power. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's shrill ring pierced through the pre-dawn silence at 4:45 a.m., just as it had every morning for the past 8 months since Marcus Rodriguez lost his job at Hendricks Construction. He rolled over in the narrow bed, his hand instinctively reaching for the space where his wife Maria used to sleep before the cancer took her 2 years ago. The gesture had become automatic, a daily reminder of the emptiness that seemed to define every aspect of his life now. At 38, Marcus looked older than his years. The stress of unemployment, single parenthood, and mounting bills had carved deep lines around his dark brown eyes and streaked his black hair with premature gray. His calloused hands, once steady and confident wielding tools on construction sites across Detroit, now shook slightly as he reached for the coffee mug that sat on the milk crate serving as his nightstand. The small apartment in Highland Park felt cramped, with 4 people sharing what had originally been designed for 2. Marcus had given up the master bedroom to his 3 children, sleeping instead on a pull-out couch in the living room that doubled as a dining area when the card table was unfolded. The walls were thin enough that he could hear 8-year-old Sofia talking in her sleep, probably dreaming about the dance classes she'd had to quit when money got tight. 12-year-old Diego's gentle snoring, mixed with the occasional whimper from 4-year-old Luis, who still had nightmares about his mother's death. Marcus padded quietly to the kitchenette, a space so small he could touch both walls with his arms outstretched. The refrigerator hummed loudly, a constant reminder that it was on its last legs, much like everything else in their lives. Inside, he found enough ingredients for breakfast sandwiches that would have to stretch until dinner. Peanut butter and jelly had become their staple meal, supplemented by whatever he could afford from the discount grocery store when his unemployment benefits came through. The morning routine had become a carefully choreographed dance of efficiency. Marcus prepared 3 lunch bags with generic crackers and fruit cups purchased with food stamps, then woke the children with the gentle patience that Maria had taught him during her final months. She'd made him promise to be both mother and father to their babies, to never let them feel like they were missing anything essential, even though both of them knew that promise would be nearly impossible to keep. Sofia emerged from the bedroom first, her dark curls tangled from sleep, and her school uniform wrinkled from being worn too many days in a row. She looked so much like Maria that sometimes Marcus had to catch his breath. The resemblance a daily gift and burden that filled him with love and grief in equal measure. "Papa, there's no hot water again," she said matter-of-factly, her 8-year-old voice carrying a resignation that broke Marcus's heart. Children shouldn't have to accept disappointment as normal, but Sofia had learned to adapt to their circumstances with a maturity that impressed and worried him. "I'll call the landlord today," Marcus promised, though they both knew that Mr. Kowalski rarely responded to maintenance requests, especially from tenants who were already 2 months behind on rent. The building's other residents faced similar challenges, most of them working multiple jobs just to afford the substandard housing in a neighborhood where gunshots weren't uncommon and sirens provided a nightly soundtrack. Diego appeared next, his 12-year-old frame already showing signs of the height he'd inherited from Marcus's side of the family. He'd grown 3 inches in the past year, making his school clothes appear too small, and emphasizing how long it had been since they'd been able to afford new ones. Despite their circumstances, Diego maintained excellent grades and had inherited his mother's quick mind for mathematics, a talent that gave Marcus hope for his son's future, even when his own seemed uncertain. Luis, the baby of the family at 4 years old, required the most patience during their morning routine. He still struggled with getting dressed independently and often asked for his mama, questions that stabbed Marcus's heart each time, but that he answered with gentle reminders about how much she loved them all and how she was watching over them from heaven. The walk to Riverside Elementary took 20 minutes through neighborhoods that told the story of Detroit's economic struggles. Abandoned houses sat next to occupied ones, their broken windows and overgrown yards creating a patchwork of decay and perseverance. Marcus held Luis's hand while Sofia and Diego walked slightly ahead, the four of them navigating cracked sidewalks and empty lots where thriving businesses had once employed thousands of workers. Other parents made the same journey, most of them single mothers or grandparents raising grandchildren, all of them carrying the weight of economic hardship with varying degrees of grace. Marcus exchanged nods with familiar faces, the unspoken understanding between them that they were all fighting similar battles and doing their best with limited resources. At the school, Marcus hugged each child goodbye, lingering a moment longer with Luis, who attended the pre-K program that provided both education and childcare while Marcus searched for work. The teachers knew their situation and had been kind about providing extra supplies and occasional snacks when Luis seemed particularly hungry. Their compassion reminded Marcus that good people existed everywhere, even in circumstances that could easily breed cynicism and despair. After dropping off the children, Marcus began his daily ritual of job hunting, a process that had become increasingly discouraging as weeks turned into months without success. The construction industry in Detroit had been devastated by the economic downturn, and positions that did exist typically went to workers with specialized certifications that Marcus couldn't afford to obtain. His experience meant nothing when employers could choose from dozens of equally qualified candidates desperate for any opportunity. The Workforce Development Center on Grand River Avenue had become his second home, its computers providing free internet access for job applications and its bulletin board offering a constantly changing selection of temporary work opportunities. Marcus had applied for everything from warehouse positions to retail jobs, usually hearing nothing back or receiving form rejection letters that cited his overqualification for entry-level positions. Today's prospects seemed no more promising than yesterday's. A landscaping company needed seasonal workers, but the pay was minimum wage with no benefits and no guarantee of hours. A cleaning service offered overnight shifts that would conflict with his children's schedules and require childcare he couldn't afford. A demolition contractor wanted someone with heavy equipment experience, which Marcus possessed, but the job was located 40 miles away in a suburb with no public transportation access. By noon, Marcus had submitted 6 applications and made 3 phone calls that resulted in 2 voicemails and 1 conversation with a receptionist who promised that someone would call him back, though her tone suggested she was simply being polite. The familiar weight of rejection settled over him as he walked through downtown Detroit, passing office buildings that seemed to mock. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. His unemployment with their displays of prosperity and purpose. The afternoon brought its own challenges as Marcus navigated the social services bureaucracy that had become necessary for his family's survival. The welfare office on Michigan Avenue required monthly check-ins that involved long waits in uncomfortable plastic chairs surrounded by other people facing similar struggles. Caseworkers, overwhelmed by impossibly large caseloads, provided assistance with the efficiency of people who had learned to process human desperation as quickly as possible. Marcus's caseworker, Mrs. Thompson, was kinder than most, but even her compassion was tempered by the reality of limited resources and endless regulations. She reviewed his job search activities with the thoroughness required by state guidelines, checking off boxes that reduced his efforts to statistical data points that would be compiled into reports no one would read. "Any luck with the construction leads I gave you last month?" she asked, her fingers already moving to the next form in his file. "2 of the companies aren't hiring anymore, and 1 wanted certifications I don't have," Marcus replied, trying to keep frustration out of his voice. Mrs. Thompson wasn't responsible for the broken system any more than he was responsible for the economic forces that had eliminated his livelihood. "There's a retraining program starting next month," she offered, highlighting information on a flyer advertising courses in medical assisting and computer repair. "It's 6 months, but they provide job placement assistance afterward." Marcus studied the requirements, calculating childcare costs and wondering how he could support his family during 6 months of unpaid training. The mathematics of poverty were unforgiving, requiring impossible choices between immediate survival and long-term stability. Every opportunity seemed to require resources he didn't possess, creating a cycle that trapped families like his in circumstances that grew more difficult to escape with each passing day. The bus ride home took 45 minutes through neighborhoods that reflected different levels of economic struggle. Marcus watched through grimy windows as the city passed by, thinking about Maria's dreams for their children and wondering how he could honor her memory when he felt like he was failing at the most basic aspects of providing for them. She'd worked as a nurse at Detroit Medical Center before the cancer diagnosis, and her income had provided stability that Marcus now realized he'd taken for granted. Together, they'd been able to afford a small house with a yard where the children could play safely. They'd talked about college funds and family vacations. The kinds of plans that seemed impossibly optimistic now, but had felt achievable when they were building their life together. The children were waiting at Mrs. Garcia's apartment when Marcus returned from his job search. Mrs. Garcia, a widow in her 70s, watched Luis and Sofia after school in exchange for help with grocery shopping and household tasks that her arthritis made difficult. The arrangement worked for both families, providing childcare Marcus couldn't afford, and assistance Mrs. Garcia needed to maintain her independence. "Papa, did you find a job today?" Sofia asked, her 8-year-old optimism still intact despite months of disappointment. Her faith in his ability to solve their problems both motivated and haunted Marcus, reminding him daily of the burden he carried as their sole provider and protector. "Not today, mija, but I will," Marcus replied, picking up Luis and feeling the boy's thin arms wrap around his neck with complete trust. "How was school?" Diego appeared from Mrs. Garcia's kitchen with homework already spread across the small table, his dedication to academic excellence unwavering despite their circumstances. His teachers had mentioned advanced placement opportunities that could lead to college scholarships, possibilities that gave Marcus hope, even when everything else seemed uncertain. "We learned about the water cycle," Luis announced proudly, his 4-year-old, enthusiasm infectious. "Rain comes from clouds, and clouds come from water, and water comes from rain." Marcus smiled at his youngest son's excitement about learning, remembering Maria's insistence that education would be their children's pathway to better lives than the ones their parents had known. She'd grown up in poverty herself and had worked 2 jobs while attending nursing school, determined to break the cycle that trapped so many families in circumstances beyond their control. Dinner that evening consisted of spaghetti with generic sauce and bread from the day-old bakery section, a meal that filled their stomachs without straining the food budget. The children ate without complaint, their acceptance of their circumstances both admirable and heartbreaking. Marcus wondered if they understood how different their lives had become since Maria's death, or if they simply adapted to whatever reality presented itself. After dinner, homework time transformed their small living space into a study hall where Marcus helped with math problems and reading assignments, while Luis played with toys donated by a local church. These evening hours were precious, filled with the kind of family connection that reminded Marcus why he continued fighting even when everything seemed hopeless. Sofia struggled with a writing assignment about her family, her pencil hovering over the paper as she considered how to describe their situation. Marcus watched her internal debate, recognizing the moment when children begin to understand that their lives are different from those they see on television or hear about from classmates with more stable circumstances. "What should I write about, Papa?" she asked, her question carrying weight beyond the simple school assignment. "Write about how much we love each other," Marcus suggested, "and how we take care of each other no matter what." Diego looked up from his algebra homework, his 12-year-old mind already grasping complexities that Marcus wished his son didn't have to understand. "Should I write about Mama in my family essay too?" The question hung in the air like a prayer, touching the grief that none of them had fully processed because survival required all their emotional energy. Marcus sat beside his son, feeling the weight of being both mother and father when he still struggled with being an adequate provider. "Your mama will always be part of our family," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "She's in your smart brain, Diego, and in Sofia's kind heart, and in Luis's beautiful smile. Writing about her means she's still with us." That night, after the children were asleep, Marcus sat at the small kitchen table with bills spread before him like evidence of his inadequacy. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Monthly expenses exceeded income by nearly $600, a gap that grew wider each month as late fees accumulated and necessities became luxuries they couldn't afford. The eviction notice from Mr. Kowalski sat prominently in the pile, its legal language politely threatening to destroy what little stability his children possessed. They had 30 days to pay the back rent or find somewhere else to live, options that seemed equally impossible given their current circumstances. Marcus thought about calling his brother in Phoenix, who'd offered help before but struggled with his own family's expenses. Pride had prevented him from accepting assistance, but pride was a luxury he could no longer afford if it meant his children might end up in foster care or homeless shelters. The apartment's thin walls carried sounds from neighboring units where other families faced similar struggles. Mrs. Johnson's baby crying inconsolably while she worked her overnight shift at the hospital. Mr. Williams's television turned up loud enough to mask the arguments with his teenage son about money they didn't have for school supplies. The symphony of urban poverty that played every night in buildings across Detroit where good people fought battles that should have been winnable in a country with such enormous wealth. Outside his window, Marcus could see the lights of downtown Detroit's Renaissance projects, gleaming towers that represented hope for the city's future but felt as distant as the moon from his current reality. The disconnect between Detroit's recovery narrative and the daily struggles of families like his created a cognitive dissonance that made him question whether progress was possible or simply an illusion that benefited some while leaving others behind. Maria's photograph sat on the windowsill, her smile frozen in a moment of happiness that felt like a lifetime ago. She'd been optimistic about Detroit's future, believing that hard work and education would create opportunities for their children that hadn't existed for previous generations. Her faith had sustained him during her illness and death, but maintaining that optimism required strength he wasn't sure he still possessed. The next morning arrived with the same alarm clock and the same routine, but something felt different as Marcus prepared breakfast for his children. Perhaps it was the eviction notice that had crystallized the urgency of their situation, or maybe it was simply the cumulative weight of months of rejection and struggle. Whatever the cause, Marcus felt a determination building inside him that transcended his usual quiet desperation. As he walked the children to school, Marcus found himself paying attention to details he'd previously overlooked. Construction projects that might need temporary workers, businesses that might have unlisted openings, opportunities that existed outside the formal job market he'd been navigating unsuccessfully for months. The abandoned textile factory on Corktown's eastern edge caught his attention in a way it hadn't before. The massive brick building had been empty for years, its broken windows and graffiti-covered walls telling the story of Detroit's industrial decline. But Marcus noticed something different about it today, activity that seemed out of place for a building that had been condemned by the city. Two expensive black sedans were parked in the factory's rear lot, their presence incongruous in a neighborhood where most residents drove aging cars or relied on public transportation. Marcus paused his walk, something about the scene triggering instincts he'd developed during his years in construction when recognizing potential danger could prevent accidents or worse. The factory had been scheduled for demolition multiple times, but bureaucratic delays and legal challenges had kept it standing like a monument to urban decay. Local kids sometimes used it as a playground, despite warnings about structural damage and environmental hazards. Parents in the neighborhood generally kept their children away, but the building's size and multiple entrances made complete monitoring impossible. Marcus made a mental note to mention the unusual activity to Mrs. Garcia, who knew everything that happened in their neighborhood and had connections with community leaders who might be interested in any developments affecting local safety. Her network of longtime residents served as an informal watch system that helped protect families in an area where police response times were measured in hours rather than minutes. After dropping off the children, Marcus decided to investigate the factory more thoroughly. His construction experience had taught him to read buildings the way others read books, understanding structural integrity and safety concerns that weren't obvious to casual observers. If someone was using the building for legitimate purposes, they should have proper permits and safety equipment. If they weren't, then children in the neighborhood could be at risk. The walk to the factory took 15 minutes through streets lined with a mixture of occupied houses, empty lots, and abandoned buildings in various stages of decay. Urban gardens maintained by community groups provided splashes of color and hope in an otherwise desolate landscape. Marcus passed several murals painted by local artists, their vibrant images celebrating Detroit's resilience and cultural heritage, despite economic hardship. As he approached the factory, Marcus could see that the black sedans were gone, but fresh tire tracks in the gravel lot suggested recent activity. The building's main entrance was secured with new chains and padlocks that looked expensive and professionally installed, a significant upgrade from the simple barriers that had previously protected the property. Marcus circled the building's perimeter, his trained eye noting details that would escape casual observation. Someone had recently repaired sections of the loading dock, and new electrical cables had been run to certain windows despite the building's condemned status. The modification suggested serious investment in a property that officially had no value, raising questions about who was responsible and what they intended to accomplish. The sound of children's voices from the nearby elementary school playground reminded Marcus that hundreds of families lived within walking distance of the factory. If something dangerous was happening inside the building, it could affect innocent people who had no knowledge of the potential threat. His protective instincts, honed by years of keeping his own children safe, demanded that he investigate further. Marcus found a section of fencing that had been cut and recently repaired, evidence that someone had been accessing the property regularly. The repair work was professional quality, suggesting that whoever was using the building had resources and skills beyond what would be expected from vandals or urban explorers. As he examined the fence line, Marcus heard sounds coming from inside the factory that made his blood run cold. What sounded like children crying, faint but unmistakable, carried on the afternoon breeze. The sounds were too distant and muffled to be certain, but Marcus's paternal instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. He pulled out his cell phone to call police, then hesitated, as he considered the likely response. His neighborhood had a complicated relationship with law enforcement, and calls about suspicious activity in abandoned buildings were rarely prioritized unless there was immediate evidence of violence or drug activity. By the time officers arrived to investigate, whatever was happening inside the factory could be finished, and any evidence could disappear. Marcus thought about his own children, safe in their classrooms but vulnerable every day to dangers he couldn't always predict or prevent. If other children were in trouble inside the factory, he couldn't simply walk away and hope that someone else would take responsibility. Maria had taught him that protecting children was every adult's obligation, not just the duty of parents or police officers. The decision crystallized with sudden clarity that surprised him. Marcus had spent months feeling helpless in the face of unemployment and poverty, circumstances beyond his control that had reduced him to a passive recipient of rejection and disappointment. But this situation was different. This was something he could act upon, something where his skills and experience could make a difference. He climbed through the gap in the fence with the careful efficiency of someone who had spent years navigating construction sites and industrial facilities. The factory's exterior showed years of neglect, but Marcus could see evidence of recent activity that confirmed his suspicions. Someone was definitely using the building for purposes that required secrecy and significant resources. As he approached the main structure, the crying sounds became clearer and more urgent. There were definitely children inside the building, and they were terrified. Marcus's training kicked in automatically as he assessed potential entry points and safety hazards. The building's age and condition created numerous dangers, but his experience with similar structures gave him confidence in navigating them safely. A side door that had been reinforced with new hardware stood slightly ajar, suggesting that someone had left quickly and forgotten to secure it properly. Marcus approached cautiously, listening for adult voices that might indicate guards or other people who would prevent him from helping whoever was inside. What he discovered when he peered through the doorway would haunt him for the rest of his life and set in motion events that would transform his family's future in ways he never could have imagined. Inside the factory's main floor, Marcus saw two small children, twins who couldn't have been older than 7, tied to chairs in the center of what had once been the building's primary production area. They were crying softly, their faces streaked with tears and dirt, their expensive clothing torn and disheveled. Even in the dim light filtering through broken windows, Marcus could see that these weren't neighborhood children. Their clothes, their haircuts, even the way they carried themselves suggested privilege and wealth that contrasted sharply with their current predicament. The space around them had been hastily converted into some kind of temporary prison. Industrial equipment had been moved to create a makeshift holding area, and camping supplies suggested that their captors had been prepared for an extended stay. Most disturbing of all, Marcus could see evidence that accelerants had been poured around the perimeter of the room. The sharp smell of gasoline mixed with the factory's existing odors of rust and decay, creating an atmosphere of immediate danger that made Marcus's construction-trained senses scream warnings. Someone had prepared to burn the building with the children inside. Whether as part of an escape plan or something more sinister, the evidence was unmistakable. Marcus had worked with enough demolition crews to recognize the signs of deliberate fire preparation, and he knew that once ignited, the old building would become an inferno within minutes. The twins noticed his movement and looked toward the doorway with expressions that broke Marcus's heart. Their eyes held the kind of terror that no child should ever experience, but when they saw him, hope flickered across their faces like candle flames in darkness. "Help us," one of them whispered, the words barely audible but carrying desperate urgency that penetrated Marcus's soul. "Please help us." Marcus stepped into the building, his mind racing through possibilities and dangers. Where were the kidnappers? How much time did he have before they returned? Could he get the children out safely, without triggering whatever plan their captors had prepared? His construction experience had taught him to assess risks quickly and act decisively, skills that seemed perfectly suited to this impossible situation. The twins were bound with professional-grade zip ties that would require tools to remove. Marcus searched the factory floor and found a piece of broken metal that he could use as a cutting edge, but freeing the children would take precious time. As he worked on the restraints, he spoke to them in the calm voice he used with his own children during emergencies. "I'm Marcus, and I'm going to get you out of here," he said, sawing carefully at the plastic restraints while listening for sounds of approaching vehicles. "What are your names?" "I'm Emma," the girl replied, her voice shaky but determined. "This is my brother Ethan. Bad men took us from school and brought us here. They said our daddy has to give them money or they'll hurt us." The scenario became clear with terrible certainty. These were ransom victims, children of someone wealthy enough to attract kidnappers who operated with the kind of resources Marcus had observed. The accelerants around the room suggested that negotiations had either failed or were about to be concluded in the most final way possible. "How long have you been here?" Marcus asked, successfully cutting through Emma's restraints and moving to work on her brother's bonds. "Since yesterday," Ethan replied, his 7-year-old voice carrying a maturity that came from experiencing trauma no child should face. "They gave us water and crackers, but they said they were going away soon and we couldn't come with them." The implications chilled Marcus to his core. The kidnappers weren't planning to release the children or continue holding them for ransom. They were preparing to eliminate evidence and witnesses, using fire to destroy any traces of their crime. Marcus had stumbled into a situation where minutes might mean the difference between life and death for 2 innocent children. As he freed Ethan from his restraints, Marcus heard the sound he'd been dreading, vehicle engines in the distance, growing closer. The kidnappers were returning, probably to implement whatever final plan they'd prepared. Marcus had perhaps minutes to get the children to safety, before armed criminals arrived to find their carefully prepared crime scene disrupted. "We need to go right now," Marcus said, helping both children to their feet. They were unsteady from being tied up for hours, but adrenaline gave them strength as they understood the urgency of escape. "Stay close to me and do exactly what I say." Marcus led them toward the side entrance he'd used to enter the building, but the sound of approaching vehicles forced him to reconsider. If the kidnappers were returning to complete their plan, they would likely use the main entrance and could spot any escape attempt through the building's open areas. The factory's layout, which Marcus had been studying during his approach, offered alternative routes that might provide better concealment. The building's original design included multiple levels and service corridors that connected different sections of the production floor. Marcus's construction experience helped him navigate the maze of abandoned machinery and structural obstacles, while keeping the children safe from hazards that could cause injury or delay their escape. As they moved through the factory's interior, Marcus could hear voices outside growing louder and more urgent. The kidnappers had apparently discovered that something was wrong, possibly noticing the unsecured door or other signs of Marcus's presence. Their shouts carried an edge of panic that suggested they understood the implications of their plan being disrupted. "Where can we go?" Emma whispered, her small hand gripping Marcus's with desperate trust. Marcus scanned the factory's upper levels, looking for options that would keep them hidden while providing escape routes if their current position was discovered. His years of working in similar buildings had taught him to read the architectural logic that governed industrial design, understanding how spaces connected and where emergency exits would be located. A service stairway leading to the factory's second floor caught his attention. The stairs were old, but appeared structurally sound, and the upper level would provide multiple options for concealment or escape. More importantly, if the kidnappers had prepared accelerants on the main floor, the second level might offer protection from immediate fire danger. "We're going up," Marcus told the children, testing the first step carefully before committing their weight to the aged structure. "Hold on to the railing and step where I step." The climb felt like hours, but probably took less than 2 minutes. Behind them, Marcus could hear the kidnappers entering the building, their voices echoing through the cavernous space as they discovered the empty chairs and cut restraints. The profanity and anger in their shouts confirmed that these were dangerous people who wouldn't hesitate to harm anyone who interfered with their plans. On the second floor, Marcus found a storage room with small windows that provided a view of the parking area where the black sedans had returned. 3 men in dark clothing were moving with military precision, suggesting professional criminals rather than opportunistic amateurs. One of them carried what appeared to be a small device, possibly a remote detonator for the accelerants Marcus had observed downstairs. The implications were terrifying. The kidnappers weren't just planning to burn the building. They intended to trigger the fire remotely, probably after leaving the area to establish alibis. If Marcus and the children had still been on the main floor when the device was activated, they would have had no chance of survival. "They're going to start a fire," Marcus explained to Emma and Ethan, his voice calm despite the fear racing through his veins. "We need to find another way out of the building before that happens." The storage room offered several advantages. Its location at the building's corner provided windows facing 2 different directions, offering multiple views of the surrounding area. More importantly, Marcus could see a fire escape attached to the building's exterior wall, accessible through a window that appeared to have been painted shut but could probably be forced open with sufficient effort. Marcus examined the window's frame and hardware, using his construction knowledge to identify the best approach for opening it quickly and safely. The paint seal would resist initial attempts, but the frame itself seemed solid enough to withstand the pressure needed to break the seal without structural failure. As he worked on the window, Marcus could hear the kidnappers searching the building below. Their systematic approach and professional communication suggested military or law enforcement backgrounds, making them far more dangerous than typical criminals. These men knew how to hunt and wouldn't give up easily once they realized their victims had escaped. "Is the window stuck?" Ethan asked, his 7-year-old mind trying to process the complexity of their situation. "Just painted shut," Marcus replied, applying steady pressure to the frame while listening for sounds from below. In old buildings like this, windows sometimes get stuck, but they always open if you know the right technique. The window suddenly gave way with a crack that sounded impossibly loud in the quiet afternoon air. Marcus froze, listening for any indication that the noise had been heard by their pursuers. The searchers below continued their systematic examination of the main floor, apparently unaware that their targets had reached the second level. The fire escape was exactly what Marcus had hoped to find. Solid construction with clear access to the ground level, providing a direct route away from the building that wouldn't require them to encounter the kidnappers. The metal structure showed signs of age but appeared structurally sound enough to support their weight safely. "We're going to climb down the outside of the building," Marcus explained to the children, helping Emma through the window first. "It's like a jungle gym, but we need to be very quiet and very careful." Emma moved with the natural agility of childhood, her small size actually an advantage on the narrow metal stairs. Ethan followed with equal confidence, both children demonstrating the resilience that had helped them survive their captivity. Marcus brought up the rear, constantly scanning for signs that their escape had been detected. As they descended the fire escape, Marcus could see more clearly the scope of the operation they'd stumbled into. Additional vehicles had arrived, including a van that could transport multiple people quickly and efficiently. The kidnappers weren't just planning to eliminate evidence. They were preparing to disappear completely, leaving behind a burned building with no trace of their crime or their victims. Halfway down the fire escape, Marcus heard an explosion from inside the building that made his heart stop. The kidnappers had apparently decided to accelerate their timeline, triggering whatever incendiary device they'd prepared rather than continuing to search for their escaped prisoners. Flames immediately began visible through the factory's windows, confirming Marcus's assessment of the accelerant's potency. "Faster!" Marcus urged the children, helping them navigate the remaining stairs as smoke began pouring from the building's interior. "We need to get away from here right now." The fire spread with shocking speed through the old building's dry timber and accumulated debris. Within minutes, the structure was fully engulfed, flames shooting through broken windows and climbing the exterior walls with voracious hunger. The heat became intense even at ground level, forcing Marcus and the children to retreat across the parking lot to avoid being caught in the inferno. From their position behind a concrete barrier, Marcus watched the kidnappers' reaction to the fire. Instead of fleeing immediately, they remained in the area, apparently waiting to confirm that their plan had succeeded. Their patience suggested confidence that no evidence would survive the blaze, including any witnesses who might have interfered with their crime. Marcus realized that he and the children were still in danger. If the kidnappers discovered that their prisoners had escaped, they would certainly attempt to eliminate the witnesses who could identify them and testify about their activities. The fire had bought them time by creating chaos and confusion, but it had also announced to anyone watching that something significant was happening at the factory. "We need to get to the police," Marcus told Emma and Ethan, scanning the area for the safest route away from the burning building. "Can you run for a few blocks?" Both children nodded, their earlier fear replaced by determination and trust in Marcus's ability to protect them. Their confidence was both inspiring and terrifying, reminding him that their lives now depended on decisions he would make in the next few minutes. The nearest police station was 6 blocks away through residential neighborhoods that offered both concealment and potential help from community members. Marcus had walked these streets for months during his job search, and he knew which houses were occupied and which residents might assist in an emergency. As they began moving away from the burning factory, Marcus heard sirens in the distance. Fire trucks responding to the blaze would arrive within minutes, followed by police investigating the suspicious fire. The presence of emergency responders would provide both protection and complications, as Marcus would need to explain his presence at the scene and his knowledge of the kidnapping. "Are we safe now?" Emma asked as they jogged through side streets lined with small houses and urban gardens. Marcus considered the question carefully, understanding that his answer would affect how the children processed their trauma and recovery. They deserved honesty, but they also needed reassurance that adults could protect them from the dangers they'd experienced. "We're safer than we were," he replied, adjusting his pace to match their shorter legs. "But we need to get to people who can make sure the bad men can't hurt anyone else." The sound of emergency vehicles grew louder as they approached the commercial district where the police station was located. Fire trucks and ambulances were racing toward the factory, their sirens creating a cacophony that announced the emergency to the entire neighborhood. Marcus hoped that the emergency response would trap the kidnappers in the area, preventing their escape and ensuring their arrest. At the police station, Marcus and the children encountered a duty sergeant who initially seemed skeptical of their story. Disheveled adults accompanied by unknown children often indicated domestic disputes or custody issues rather than genuine emergencies. Marcus's appearance, clothes still dirty from his escape through the factory, probably didn't inspire immediate confidence in his credibility. "Sir, I need you to slow down and explain what happened," Sergeant Williams said, his professional demeanor suggesting experience with confused or emotional visitors. "You're saying you found kidnapped children in the burning building on Corktown." Marcus took a deep breath and organized his thoughts, understanding that the next few minutes would determine whether the authorities took immediate action or dismissed his report as the confused rambling of someone seeking attention. The children stood close to him, their presence lending credibility to his extraordinary claims. "These are Emma and Ethan," Marcus began, placing protective hands on the children's shoulders. "They were kidnapped yesterday from their school and held in the textile factory that's currently burning. 3 men were planning to kill them and destroy the evidence with fire. I found them tied up and got them out just before the building was set ablaze." Sergeant Williams studied the children more carefully, noting details that supported Marcus's account. Their expensive clothing, though dirty and torn, suggested wealthy families. Their body language indicated recent trauma, and the way they stayed close to Marcus suggested he had indeed rescued them rather than harmed them. "What are your full names?" The sergeant asked the twins gently. "Emma Catherine Blackstone." The girl replied with the clear diction of private school education. "This is my twin brother, Ethan Michael Blackstone. Our daddy is Jonathan Blackstone, and our mommy is Dr. Sarah Blackstone. We live on Grosse Pointe Shore Drive." The name Blackstone hit Sergeant Williams like a physical blow. Jonathan Blackstone was one of Detroit's most prominent businessmen, owner of Blackstone Industries and half a dozen other major companies. His kidnapped children would have triggered a massive law enforcement response involving the FBI and every available resource in the metropolitan area. "When did this kidnapping occur?" Williams asked, reaching for his radio to alert dispatch of the situation's urgency. "Yesterday afternoon," Ethan replied. "Men with guns took us from our school parking lot when our driver was putting us in the car. They put us in a van and brought us to the scary building." Williams immediately contacted FBI Special Agent Jennifer Morrison, who had been coordinating the search for the Blackstone twins since their disappearance was reported 24 hours earlier. The case had become a federal priority due to Jonathan Blackstone's prominence and the suspected involvement of organized crime in the kidnapping. Within minutes, the police station filled with federal agents, detectives, and emergency personnel responding to the breakthrough in a case that had mobilized every law enforcement agency in southeastern Michigan. Marcus found himself at the center of a controlled hurricane of activity as agents processed the scene, interviewed witnesses, and coordinated the massive response to the burning factory. Agent Morrison, a seasoned investigator with 20 years of experience in violent crimes, approached Marcus with the intensity of someone accustomed to dealing with life-and-death situations. Her questions were precise and professional, designed to extract maximum information while preserving the integrity of evidence that would eventually be used in court. "Mr. Rodriguez, I need you to walk me through exactly what you observed at the factory," she said, activating a digital recorder. Every detail could be crucial for apprehending the suspects and preventing future crimes. Marcus recounted his discovery methodically, describing the layout of the building, the evidence of preparation for destruction, the professional behavior of the kidnappers, and the systematic nature of their operation. His construction background proved invaluable in providing technical details about the building's structure and the accelerants that had been used to ensure complete destruction. "You mentioned that the suspects appeared to have military or law enforcement training," quote, Agent Morrison noted. "What specific behaviors led you to that conclusion?" "Their communication was disciplined and efficient," Marcus explained. "They moved in formation, used hand signals, and approached the search systematically rather than randomly. These weren't street criminals acting impulsively. They had training and experience in tactical operations." The information confirmed suspicions that had been developing throughout the investigation. The Blackstone kidnapping showed signs of professional execution that suggested organized crime involvement or corrupted former military personnel operating as mercenaries. The FBI had been pursuing leads connecting the case to several other high-profile kidnappings across the Midwest, as agents coordinated their response to the factory fire and the ongoing manhunt for the suspects. Marcus found himself in an unexpected position. Instead of being simply a witness to events, he had become central to an investigation that would determine whether dangerous criminals faced justice or escaped to threaten other families. Dr. Sarah Blackstone arrived at the police station with an entourage of security personnel and family attorneys, her relief at seeing her children alive competing with the controlled fury of a mother whose babies had been threatened. She was a striking woman in her early 40s, her professional demeanor as a prominent surgeon barely containing the emotional turbulence of the past 24 hours. "Emma, Ethan, are you hurt?" she asked, kneeling to embrace her children with the fierce protectiveness that only parents could understand. "Did those men hurt you in any way?" "We're okay, Mommy," Emma replied, though her voice carried the strain of their ordeal. "Marcus saved us from the fire. He cut our ropes and helped us climb down the outside of the building." Dr. Blackstone turned her attention to Marcus with an expression that mixed gratitude, curiosity, and the analytical assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating people quickly and accurately. Her medical training had taught her to read stress indicators and trauma responses, skills that applied to her current situation as much as to her surgical practice. "Mr. Rodriguez, I understand that you risked your life to save my children," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to begin thanking you for what you've done." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the attention and praise, his natural humility conflicting with the extraordinary circumstances that had placed him in the spotlight. He had acted on instinct and moral obligation rather than seeking recognition or reward, and the gratitude of wealthy strangers felt foreign to someone whose recent experience had been defined by rejection and dismissal. "I just did what anyone would do," Marcus replied, though both he and Dr. Blackstone knew that wasn't true. Most people would have called police and waited for professional responders, rather than entering a dangerous building to confront armed criminals. "No," Dr. Blackstone insisted. "You did what very few people would have the courage to do. You saw children in danger and acted without consideration for your own safety. That's heroism, not normal behavior. Jonathan Blackstone's arrival transformed the police station's atmosphere from controlled urgency to barely contained chaos. As one of Detroit's most powerful businessmen, his presence brought additional security personnel, media attention, and political pressure that complicated the ongoing investigation. Blackstone was a man in his mid-40s whose success in multiple industries had made him a prominent figure in Detroit's economic renaissance. His wealth and influence typically insulated him from the kinds of dangers that affected ordinary citizens, making his family's victimization both shocking and deeply personal. Agent Morrison, what's the status of the investigation? Blackstone demanded, his corporate executive's need for control evident in every gesture. Have the suspects been apprehended? What measures are being taken to ensure this doesn't happen again? Mr. Blackstone, we're pursuing multiple leads and have mobilized every available resource. Agent Morrison replied, with the diplomatic efficiency required when dealing with powerful civilians. The most important thing right now is that your children are safe, and the immediate threat has been neutralized. Blackstone's attention shifted to Marcus with the intensity of someone accustomed to identifying key players in complex situations. His assessment was calculating and thorough, evaluating Marcus not just as the man who had saved his children, but as someone whose actions had revealed character traits worthy of recognition and reward. Mr. Rodriguez, I understand that you entered a burning building to rescue Emma and Ethan, Blackstone said, extending his hand with the firm grip of someone who understood the importance of personal connection. That kind of courage deserves more than words of gratitude. Marcus shook the offered hand while feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. His rescue of the children had been motivated by moral obligation and parental instinct, not by any expectation of compensation or recognition from their wealthy family. I appreciate your thanks, but I don't need anything, Marcus replied. I'm just glad the children are safe and back with their family. The response seemed to surprise both Blackstone parents, who were accustomed to people seeking advantage from any interaction with their family's wealth and influence. Marcus's genuine discomfort with praise and his lack of interest in personal gain marked him as unusual in their experience. Agent Morrison interrupted the conversation to provide updates on the investigation's progress. The factory fire had been contained, but the building's destruction had eliminated most physical evidence of the kidnapping operation. However, surveillance cameras in the surrounding area had captured images of the suspects and their vehicles, providing leads that were being pursued aggressively. We've identified 2 of the 3 suspects through facial recognition software, Morrison reported. Both have military backgrounds and have been linked to other kidnapping cases in Illinois and Ohio. We're coordinating with federal task forces in both states to develop a comprehensive picture of their organization. The revelation that Emma and Ethan's kidnapping was part of a larger criminal enterprise added gravity to an already serious situation. The suspects weren't local criminals acting opportunistically, but members of a sophisticated organization that targeted wealthy families across multiple states. What kind of organization are we dealing with? Dr. Blackstone asked, her medical training making her comfortable with difficult information that others might prefer to avoid. Professional kidnappers who specialize in high-value targets, Morrison explained. They research their victims extensively, plan operations carefully, and have resources that suggest significant financial backing. This wasn't a random crime. Your family was specifically targeted. The implications sent a chill through the room as everyone processed the idea that the Blackstone family remained potential targets for future attacks. The successful rescue of the twins had disrupted one operation, but it hadn't eliminated the underlying threat from criminals who viewed them as valuable assets. What security measures do you recommend? Blackstone asked, his corporate problem-solving mindset immediately shifting to prevention and protection strategies. Morrison outlined a comprehensive security protocol that would transform the family's daily routine. Professional bodyguards, armored vehicles, safe rooms in their residence, and background checks on all service personnel would become permanent features of their lives until the criminal organization was dismantled. As the briefing continued, Marcus began to understand the broader implications of his actions. By rescuing Emma and Ethan, he had not only saved 2 children, but also provided crucial intelligence that could help law enforcement protect other potential victims. The suspects' abandonment of their carefully planned operation meant that evidence might exist at other locations, leading to arrests that could prevent future kidnappings. The children, meanwhile, had been examined by paramedics and found to be physically unharmed despite their ordeal. Their resilience impressed the medical personnel, though everyone understood that the psychological impact of their experience would require professional counseling and long-term support. "Mr. Rodriguez, the children have been asking for you," Dr. Blackstone said during a brief break in the official proceedings. "I think your presence would be comforting to them right now." Marcus found Emma and Ethan in a conference room that had been converted into a temporary family area, complete with toys and snacks provided by victim services personnel. They looked small and vulnerable, despite their earlier bravery, the stress of their experience finally beginning to show as the immediate danger passed. "Marcus, are you going to visit us at our house?" Emma asked with the directness of childhood. "Mommy and Daddy want to talk to you about something important." The invitation surprised Marcus, who had assumed that his role in the family's crisis would end with the rescue and police interviews. He hadn't considered that the Blackstones might want ongoing contact with the man who had saved their children, particularly given the vast differences in their social and economic circumstances. "I'm not sure that's appropriate," Marcus replied carefully. "Your family probably needs time to recover from everything that's happened." "But we want to see you again," Ethan insisted with 7-year-old logic. "You are a friend now, and friends visit each other." The simple statement touched Marcus profoundly, reminding him of his own children's capacity for forming immediate bonds with people who showed them kindness. Emma and Ethan's desire to maintain contact spoke to something deeper than gratitude for his rescue efforts. Dr. Blackstone approached the conversation with the diplomatic skill of someone accustomed to navigating complex social situations. Her invitation was carefully worded to respect Marcus's independence while expressing genuine interest in continuing their relationship. "Mr. Rodriguez, we would be honored if you and your family would join us for dinner this weekend," she said. "The children have been talking about meeting Sofia, Diego, and Luis, and Jonathan and I would like to discuss ways we might be able to help your family." The offer triggered Marcus's defensive instincts about charity and pity from wealthy people who viewed his poverty as a problem to be solved rather than a circumstance to be understood. His pride bristled at the implication that he needed assistance, even though his financial situation remained desperate. "I appreciate the invitation, but my family and I are doing fine," Marcus replied, though the statement was obviously untrue to everyone present. "We don't need any help." Agent Morrison observed the interaction with professional interest, recognizing the complex dynamics that often developed between crime victims and the people who assisted them. Her experience had taught her that gratitude and pride could create tensions that required careful management to preserve relationships that benefited everyone involved. "Mr. Rodriguez, you've provided invaluable assistance to this investigation," Morrison said. "Your cooperation will be essential as we build cases against the suspects and their organization. We'll need you to work with our sketch artists, review evidence, and possibly testify in federal court." The reminder of ongoing legal responsibilities provided Marcus with a practical reason to maintain contact with the Blackstone family and law enforcement personnel. His role as a key witness meant that his involvement in the case was far from over, regardless of his personal preferences about accepting help from wealthy strangers. Over the following days, Marcus found himself drawn deeper into an investigation that expanded far beyond the rescue of 2 kidnapped children. FBI analysis of the suspects' operation revealed connections to at least 8 other kidnappings across 4 states, representing a criminal enterprise that had operated successfully for several years. The sophistication of the organization impressed even experienced investigators. They maintained safe houses in multiple cities, employed specialists in surveillance and communications, and had access to weapons and equipment that suggested military or law enforcement connections. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to have inside information about their targets, schedules, and security arrangements. "Someone is providing them with intelligence about potential victims," Agent Morrison explained during one of Marcus's debriefing sessions. "The level of detail they possessed about the Blackstone family's routines suggests access to private information that wouldn't be available through casual surveillance." The possibility of corruption within law enforcement or private security companies added another layer of complexity to an already challenging investigation. Every agency and contractor with access to information about wealthy families became a potential source of leaks that enabled criminal targeting. Marcus's construction experience proved unexpectedly valuable in analyzing evidence from the abandoned factory. His knowledge of building systems and industrial equipment helped investigators understand how the suspects had modified the structure for their purposes, and identify potential sources of materials and expertise. The electrical work was professional quality, Marcus explained, examining photographs of the wiring that had been installed to support the operation. Someone with commercial electrical experience did this installation. It wasn't improvised by amateurs. The technical details provided new leads for investigators to pursue, potentially connecting the kidnapping operation to legitimate businesses that employed people with the required skills. Every piece of evidence brought the investigation closer to identifying the criminal network's full scope and membership. Meanwhile, Marcus's family situation remained unchanged, despite his involvement in a case that had attracted national media attention. The eviction notice from his landlord still sat on his kitchen table, a reminder that heroism didn't pay rent or provide food for his children. Sofia, Diego, and Luis had been confused by their father's sudden absence and the attention their family was receiving from strangers who wanted to interview Marcus about his rescue of the kidnapped children. The media interest felt intrusive and unwelcome to people who valued their privacy and had no experience dealing with public attention. "Papa, why are reporters calling our house?" Sofia asked during one of their evening conversations. "Mrs. Garcia says people have been asking about us in the neighborhood." Marcus struggled to explain the situation in terms that his 8-year-old daughter could understand without frightening her about the dangers that existed in the world. His rescue of Emma and Ethan had demonstrated both the reality of evil and the possibility of good people triumphing over it, lessons that were complicated for children to process. "I helped some children who were in trouble," Marcus explained, "and now police officers need me to help them catch the bad people who hurt those children. Sometimes when adults do important things, other people want to know about it." The attention also brought practical complications. Marcus's unemployment benefits had been suspended pending investigation of his change in circumstances, a bureaucratic response to media reports about his involvement in a high-profile case. Caseworkers assumed that his assistance to a wealthy family would result in financial compensation that would affect his eligibility for government assistance. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that his heroic actions had created new obstacles to supporting his family. While media outlets praised his courage and selflessness, government agencies treated his involvement in the case as a potential source of unreported income that needed to be investigated and documented. Dr. Blackstone's persistent invitations to dinner became more compelling as Marcus's financial situation deteriorated and his children's needs remained unmet. His pride warred with practical necessity as he considered whether accepting help from grateful parents constituted charity or simply reasonable compensation for services rendered. The Blackstone family's wealth was evident in every interaction, from their luxury vehicles to their designer clothing to their casual references to international travel and exclusive schools. Yet Marcus had observed genuine warmth and concern in their treatment of his children during the brief meetings that had occurred during the investigation. "Mr. Rodriguez, we're not offering charity," Dr. Blackstone had explained during one of their conversations at the police station. "We're expressing gratitude to someone who risked his life for our children." There's a difference between pity and appreciation. The distinction was important to Marcus, whose experience with poverty had taught him to recognize the subtle condescension that often accompanied well-meaning assistance from wealthy people. The Blackstones seemed different, perhaps because their recent experience with helplessness had given them perspective on circumstances beyond their control. Agent Morrison's updates on the investigation provided additional context for understanding the significance of Marcus's actions. The criminal organization that had targeted the Blackstone children was responsible for at least 12 kidnappings over 3 years, generating millions of dollars in ransom payments from families who had paid rather than risk their children's lives. "Your intervention prevented what would have been a perfect crime," Morrison told Marcus during one of their meetings. The suspects had planned to collect their ransom payment and eliminate all evidence, including the witnesses. Without your involvement, they would have succeeded completely. The realization that his actions had saved not only Emma and Ethan but also prevented future crimes gave Marcus a sense of purpose that transcended his personal circumstances. His unemployment and financial struggles remained serious problems, but they were now balanced by knowledge that he had made a meaningful difference in the world. The breakthrough in the case came when surveillance footage from a truck stop in Ohio provided clear images of all 3 suspects together, allowing investigators to identify the third man and trace their movements across state lines. The evidence connected them to safe houses in Chicago and Indianapolis, locations where additional victims might be held or where evidence of previous crimes could be recovered. Coordinated raids across multiple states resulted in the arrest of not only the 3 men who had kidnapped Emma and Ethan, but also 5 additional members of their organization. The operation recovered evidence linking the group to 14 separate kidnappings and millions of dollars in ransom payments that had been laundered through offshore accounts. This was one of the most successful operations we've conducted against organized kidnapping, Agent Morrison announced during a press conference that attracted national media attention. The courage of one citizen who refused to ignore children in danger has led to the dismantling of a criminal enterprise that had terrorized families across the Midwest. Marcus watched the press conference from his small apartment. His children gathered around him as they processed the magnitude of what their father had accomplished. The investigation that had begun with his discovery of 2 kidnapped children had expanded into a federal case that would protect countless other families from similar crimes. "Papa, you're famous," Louise observed with 4-year-old amazement, pointing at the television screen where Agent Morrison praised Marcus's heroism. "Everyone knows you're brave." The recognition was gratifying, but Marcus remained focused on practical concerns about his family's immediate future. Fame didn't pay bills or provide stability for children who needed consistent housing and adequate nutrition. His involvement in a high-profile case had brought attention but not solutions to the problems that had defined his life before the rescue. Dr. Blackstone's phone call that evening carried a different tone than their previous conversations, reflecting the formal conclusion of the immediate crisis and the beginning of what she hoped would be a long-term relationship between their families. "Mr. Rodriguez, Jonathan and I would like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss something important," she said. "We have a proposal that we believe would benefit both our families, but we'd prefer to discuss it in person, rather than over the phone." The invitation felt momentous in a way that Marcus couldn't fully explain. His rescue of Emma and Ethan had been motivated by moral obligation and parental instinct, but he was beginning to understand that his actions had created opportunities and relationships that could transform his family's future in ways he had never imagined. That night, as Marcus lay on his pull-out couch listening to his children's peaceful breathing in the next room, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought him from desperate unemployment to national recognition as a hero. The path ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in months he felt hope stirring in his chest, alongside the ever-present worry about providing for Sofia, Diego, and Luis. The meeting with the Blackstones would either confirm his fears about wealthy people's tendency to view poverty as a problem to be managed, or it would open doors to possibilities that he hadn't dared to consider during the darkest months following Maria's death. Either way, Marcus knew that his family's story was about to take another unexpected turn, one that would test his principles as much as his courage had been tested in the burning factory, where 2 children had waited for someone brave enough to save them. Outside his window, Detroit's skyline glittered with the lights of renewal and possibility, a reminder that even cities could rise from devastation if enough people were willing to fight for something better than what they had inherited. Marcus's fight was just beginning, but he was no longer fighting alone, and the stakes had expanded far beyond his family's immediate survival to include justice, purpose, and the kind of legacy he wanted to leave for his children. The Blackstone estate in Grosse Pointe Shore existed in a world so far removed from Marcus's Highland Park apartment that it might as well have been on another planet. As his aging pickup truck passed through the wrought iron gates, Marcus felt the weight of economic disparity pressing down on him like a physical force. Manicured lawns stretched toward a mansion that could have housed 50 families like his, its limestone facade gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. Jonathan Blackstone met Marcus at the circular driveway, his casual designer clothing probably worth more than Marcus earned in 6 months when he was employed. Yet his handshake was firm and genuine, his eyes reflecting the gratitude that had deepened in the weeks since his children's rescue. "Marcus, thank you for coming," Blackstone said, leading him toward the house. "Emma and Ethan have been asking about you constantly. They've set up a fort in the playroom specifically for when Sofia, Diego, and Luis visit." Inside the mansion, Marcus tried not to gawk at artwork that belonged in museums and furnishings that represented casual luxury beyond his comprehension. Yet Emma and Ethan's excited squeals as they rushed to greet him reminded him that underneath all the wealth, this was simply a family grateful for their children's lives. Dr. Blackstone appeared from what Marcus assumed was a home office, her professional demeanor softened by the relief that had replaced the terror of nearly losing her twins. She guided them to a sitting room where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that required a full-time staff to maintain. "Marcus, we've been discussing how to properly express our gratitude," she began, settling into a chair that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. "Financial compensation seems inadequate for saving our children's lives, but we wanted to start there." Jonathan reached for an envelope on the side table, his movements deliberate and ceremonial. "The FBI recovered most of the ransom money that was prepared for the kidnappers. $5 million that was meant to purchase our children's freedom. We want you to have it." The number hit Marcus like a physical blow, temporarily stealing his ability to speak or think clearly. $5 million represented more money than he could spend in several lifetimes, enough to solve every problem his family faced, and create opportunities he had never dared to imagine. "I can't accept that," Marcus said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't rescue Emma and Ethan from money. I did it because it was right." "We know that," Dr. Blackstone replied gently. "That's exactly why you deserve it. You risked your life for our children, without any expectation of reward. That kind of selflessness should be honored, not ignored." Jonathan leaned forward, his corporate negotiator's instincts engaging as he sensed Marcus's resistance. "Consider it an investment in your children's future. Sofia's dance classes, Diego's college education, Luis's opportunities to become whatever he dreams of being. You've given our children their futures. Let us help secure your children's futures." The argument was compelling because it shifted the focus from charity to investment, from Marcus's pride to his children's needs. Sofia had cried when she had to quit ballet lessons. Diego's teachers constantly mentioned his academic potential and the advanced programs he could access with proper resources. Luis deserved the same advantages that Emma and Ethan would have automatically. "There's something else," Dr. Blackstone continued. "Jonathan's construction company has been looking for someone to head their safety and operations division. Your background in construction, combined with your demonstrated courage and judgment, makes you an ideal candidate. The position comes with a salary of $200,000 annually, plus benefits." Marcus's mind reeled as he processed the magnitude of what was being offered. Not just the ransom money, but a career opportunity that would provide ongoing stability and purpose. The job would utilize his skills while offering advancement potential he had never imagined possible. "Why would you do this?" Marcus asked, genuinely puzzled by generosity that seemed to exceed any reasonable expression of gratitude. Emma answered before her parents could respond, her 7-year-old logic cutting through adult complexities with startling clarity. "Because you're family now. When someone saves your family, they become family too." The simple statement encapsulated something profound about human connection that transcended economic circumstances. Marcus had risked everything for children he didn't know, and in doing so, he had created bonds that couldn't be measured in financial terms. Jonathan nodded at his daughter's wisdom. "Emma's right. You didn't just save our children. You showed us what real courage looks like. We want you to be part of our lives going forward. Not as employees or beneficiaries, but as friends and extended family." The transformation was overwhelming. Marcus thought about his children eating peanut butter sandwiches while Emma and Ethan's family offered them access to every advantage wealth could provide. He thought about eviction notices and utility shutoffs, problems that would disappear instantly with the resources being offered. Most importantly, he thought about Maria's dreams for their children, and her belief that hard work and integrity would eventually be rewarded. She had died without seeing that reward, but somehow her values had led Marcus to this moment where doing the right thing had created possibilities beyond their wildest hopes. "I need to discuss this with my children," Marcus said finally. "They should understand what this means for our family before I make any decisions." Dr. Blackstone smiled, recognizing the thoughtful parenting that had shaped Marcus's character. "Of course. Take all the time you need. The money and the job offer will remain available whenever you're ready." That evening, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table with Sofia, Diego, and Luis, trying to explain how their lives were about to change in ways that seemed like fairy tales rather than reality. The children listened with wide eyes as he described the Blackstone family's offer and what it would mean for their future. "Does this mean I can take dance classes again?" Sofia asked, her 8-year-old heart focused on the dream she had been forced to abandon. "Yes, Misha. You can take any classes you want, attend the best schools, and have opportunities I never imagined possible. Diego, with his 12-year-old's more sophisticated understanding, asked the question that went to the heart of Marcus's concerns. Will we still be the same family? Will we still be us? Marcus considered the question carefully, understanding that his son was worried about losing their identity and values in the midst of sudden wealth. It was a legitimate concern that many families faced when circumstances changed dramatically. We'll always be us, Marcus assured him. Money doesn't change who we are inside. It just gives us more opportunities to help other people and to honor Mama's memory by doing good things with the blessings we've received. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his new office at Blackstone Construction, looking out at Detroit's skyline through windows that reflected his incredible journey from unemployed father to safety director of one of the city's largest construction companies. The transformation still felt surreal, but he had embraced his new role with the same integrity that had guided his rescue of Emma and Ethan. The ransom money had been placed in trust funds for his children's education and future needs, while Marcus lived comfortably, but modestly, on his salary. He had purchased a home in a safe neighborhood with good schools, but nothing approaching the mansion-like excess he could have afforded. Maria's values continued to guide his decisions about wealth and responsibility. Emma and Ethan had become regular fixtures in his children's lives, their friendship bridging economic differences with the ease of childhood. The 8 children played together, studied together, and reminded both families that human connections mattered more than financial circumstances. Marcus had also established a foundation to help other families facing kidnapping or violent crimes, using his experience and resources to provide support that government agencies often couldn't offer. The work gave purpose to his wealth and honored the courage that had transformed his family's destiny. Agent Morrison's final report on the kidnapping organization had revealed the full scope of what Marcus's intervention had prevented. The group had been planning to expand their operations internationally, potentially threatening hundreds of additional families across multiple countries. His split-second decision to enter a burning building had dismantled a criminal empire and saved countless future victims. As Marcus prepared to leave his office that Friday evening, he reflected on the strange alchemy that had transformed a moment of moral courage into a lifetime of opportunity and purpose. He had saved 2 children from a burning warehouse, and in return, the universe had given him and his family a future beyond their dreams. His phone buzzed with a text from Diego, now 13, and excelling in accelerated academic programs that would prepare him for early college admission. "Papa, can Ethan come to my science fair next week? We are working on a project about how heroes are made." Marcus smiled as he typed his response, thinking about Maria's belief that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they chose courage over fear. He had never set out to be a hero, but he had discovered that heroism was simply doing the right thing when it mattered most, regardless of the cost or consequences. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.